Welcome back. Well, yes, that's what we're focusing on this morning. That's what we're starting with. We're joined now by Professor Charles Dokubo, who is an Associate Research Fellow at Nigerian Institute of International Affairs. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Well, this fresh wave this year, I mean, the Institute studies this kind of matters time and again, but were you surprised at this latest wave?
Sometimes, I think it took everybody by surprise, even the South African government. The fact is that if they've known, they will have positioned policemen around the areas that are very vulnerable, and the space that is being shared by Africans and South Africans. They will have sent troops there or placed there to maintain peace and calm. But it took everybody by surprise. We shouldn't be surprised. But if you look at the utterances of some of their leaders and all that, the Zulu King, some of them who have been so unexposed to know the reality of the situation on the ground, to make statements like that are inciting to violence and all that were unacceptable by any means.
But part of what was said there, in 2008, the same kind of attacks happened.
Yes.
And so if you say they were kind of surprised, so many wonder, does that mean that what happened the last time, how did they tackle it, and then they think that it could happen again?
Also, we also have to ask ourselves, what pressure do we put on the South African government to make sure that they take decisions about what happened at that time? We did not say anything until now, then we talk about it again. This is something, we're talking about, our diplomats talking about our citizens very important to ourselves. Then we have to press on to find out exactly what happened at that time. If we didn't say anything, it clearly shows that we don't have a sort of interest in wherever our citizens are, but we should be.
And a lot of people have condemned xenophobia. You just listened to Professor Bolaji Akinyemi, and his views were quite strong. Did you agree with him?
I differ with him in a lot of issues.
Okay.
Especially when most Nigerians and academics talk that the South Africans owe us a lot and all that. I don't buy into that. We don't, even if you have a son, you train your son, educate your son, you don't have to remind him every time when you taught him and all that. What Nigeria did for South Africa was we liberated ourselves. If you look at Nigerian foreign policy, it is clearly stated the liberation of every black man in every part of the world is one of our cardinal points so far as our foreign policy is concerned. So whatever we did for South Africa, we did for ourselves. We liberated the black man, and so it also helps to enhance our own prestige. That in a continent that belongs to us, we're not going to see a black man. They are under subjugation by minority rules and all that. So that's where I differ with him. We should not always be singing, making a sing and dance about it, that we did that and all. There are also other countries in sub-Saharan Africa that were bombed by the apartheid regime and all that. I believe that Nigeria did something, but they did it for themselves. We did it because we don't want to see a black nation being subjected to minority rules in Africa.
So you think we should consider this history?
The history,
whatever we did.
Definitely, the history is there for us, but the interpretation of the narrative of the history is what I don't like. The fact is that we cannot continue to make a song and dance about it. The South African citizens have done something wrong. It's not the South African government. What we have to do is that how do we call the ambassador, the High Commissioner in Nigeria, to tell him in no uncertain terms that if this thing occurs again, we're not going to be happy. If you look at Nigerians who are there, they are just enterprising young men setting up corner shops at the area. But the only thing also that they are the vulnerable groups in the sense that they share the same space with South Africans that don't have jobs and all that. And they could always see that these people are enterprising, people are going to the shops to buy things and all that. So we have to look at the whole thing. And then it's not easy to monitor and also to send police to everywhere in South Africa. Look at the distance. It happened some years back, and now it has come to play again. We have to look at the signpost, the language, the body language and everything, the pulse of the people, and see how the South African government will police these areas in which we have Africans, and especially the poor Africans. But you see some black Africans or some Africans who are in other secluded and gated communities don't see the effect of this. These are the thriving and struggling Africans who are there thinking that they could make something out of the South African situation. So we have to be very, and then also as leaders, we also have to be very careful with the type of word we use. We can
back home here.
Back home here. We don't have to inflate to hype up the situation. They've done something wrong. We'll call the High Commissioner, tell them on.
Who has been speaking, by the way, with
yes.
many of Nigerian officials,
Yes.
even to the press as well.
Yes, that next time we're not going to accept it again, because we don't talk about retaliations. You know, if you talk about retaliation, it's not good for our image. Because of the role we played in Africa, even in South Africa, they've made something wrong, but we put it to them in no uncertain terms that Nigeria will not accept. We're not going to talk about retaliation anymore.
What's the interpretation of our foreign policy when they say we've got this principle of reciprocity?
Yes, it is. But you know, reciprocity doesn't mean that you pay evil for evil. In relationships with that country, you know, you do things, and then because of what you do for to them, they will also reciprocate in that manner. But also, reciprocity only happens when you have the power and wherewithal to pursue those interests that you've highlighted in your foreign policy and in dealing with other. But if you just make noise and say this is what I want to do and you cannot do it, then definitely no person will pay attention to you. Reciprocity also needs the power potentials of a country to display itself. So we have to be careful also, because you know, Nigeria is a vast country with all the resources and human resources, natural and everything together. But we cannot continue. You know, we have shown the sunlight and the signs to other countries, the way we conduct our foreign affairs and all that.
So, but when we came up with that foreign policy of ours,
Yes.
which is Afrocentric, and then we'll talk about principle of reciprocity, did we factor in our capacity to back up that foreign policy?
Some of these statements are what we call aspirational, in the sense that you aspire to it if things work out well. That for Nigeria to protect their black man in every part of the world, sometimes
That's
I think
huge.
it's beyond, we'll be punching above our weight if we do that. So we have to be, it's aspirational, and there's nothing wrong so far as foreign policy is concerned when you put in aspirational goals and all that, which sometimes might not be achievable.
Well, it would seem that what you're asking is that we should show a bit more understanding with the South African government. But what Professor Akinyemi was saying, you know, about the body language of their leaders, that it doesn't look like they've done enough to, you know, let their people know that the rest of Africa was behind them in the struggle, and why it is that, you know, these people whom you say, and you know, a lot of people say it boils down to education, and you're talking about the very, you know, base of society here,
Yes.
the very poor and very vulnerable.
Yes.
It doesn't look like they know enough about this history for them to appreciate that these truly are their brothers.
I don't think that at this age, that's when you're going to teach them how Nigeria, what Nigeria did or other African countries do to them. It is the government's position to always sort of a reawakening call to their citizens that you cannot behave this. And whenever they try to redress the situation, they must bring back the history of the relationship between this country. But to hold a class and teach, you're going to teach South Africans now that this is where Nigeria, this is where other African countries behave, or help them in the crisis period, it will be difficult. And then sometimes you must know that the blacks believed that with the emergence of an African government, you know, they are going to they will have the commanding height of the economies. The economy will expand in such a way that those who have been left behind will have a place to work, and sometimes it doesn't grow that way. Sometimes governments are not able to bake the cake in such a way that it will go to all sectors and facets of society. We must know that. So whenever there is that sort of cyclical economic problems, the vulnerable groups are the blacks who are struggling with them on the same turf. These are the people that they will always attack and then do things to them. So we have to be careful. Our people are there. They are looking for things to do. And I believe that if everything here is okay, I don't think they will go there. But also, for the sake of adventure, people, however good your country is, people will still move out to other places. They believe that the patches there will be greener.